are United by Rice, where we talk about all things ANHPI. And I am Junko Goda. I'm one of the co-hosts, and I'm here with my fellow co-host.
I'm Ben Lee. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Ben.
Yeah, well, excited to talk to everyone, but to introduce our two guests today. So we talked to Marilyn Fu a couple weeks back about the movie Rosemead, and she was the writer on that. Today we've got actually Eric Lin, the director, as well as Lucy Liu, the star, and of course the legend. So very excited to talk to both of them. We'll play their interviews back to back. They weren't unfortunately together, but that's good because you get a little bit of different takes on things from each of them separately. So we talked about Rosemead when we talked to Marilyn. So we'll spend a little bit less time repeating the log line other than to say, the film is going on wide release the 9th of January, which is Friday this week, but also probably after this podcast will air. So it's out in a wider release. Hopefully it's playing in your city. A quick recap: Rosemead stars Lucy Liu and Lawrence Shu. It's a film about an Asian single mom, Chinese single mom, raising a teenage son who has some mental health issues, and really kind of the challenges and difficulties in a Asian community, kind of living by old-fashioned Asian, we're not going to talk about this publicly or ask for help rules, right? And what the consequences of that were. Yeah. This is all based on a true story of a woman or a mother who was written about in the LA Times several years ago. So great film. I know when I watched it, it's hard, but I know when I watched it, it took zero time for me to instantly recognize everybody, right? Like, oh, that's my mom, that's my aunt, they're exactly like the people in my life.
And I felt like, granted, I think the public has probably not really ever seen Lucy Liu's mom, but watching it, there was that moment in like the first 10 minutes of the film that I was like, oh, that's Lucy's mom, is kind of what I felt.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and that kind of hit in a really truthful way.
100%.
I think of like, oh, she's definitely like, pulling from what she knows. And definitely think, her mom is kind of part of the movie too, I think, somewhere. Did she talk about that at all? Like her family?
Not
really.
You have time?
I mean,
we didn't have so much time. I mean, I did ask, like, was she inspired to make this film based on people that she had known in her life? So without going into, who, she's certainly been surrounded by these people, right? Like, it's very familiar to her, whether it's on the mental health side or just, the more quiet mother, protective mother type, right? The other thing I'd say about the film, and it's I was trying to think about what's going on with Lucy Liu right now, in the sense of she was just given a tribute at the Critics' Choice, not Critics' Choice Awards, but like the luncheon that celebrates Asian American film and television. I think she received an award from TAF, like the Asian American Foundation. So somehow this film, after this long career she's had, is almost serving as like this lifetime achievement opportunity for her. And I talked to her, I kind of described it to her like this. It's like, during the little renaissance of Asian films that we had with Crazy Rich Asians, Shang-Chi, Everything Everywhere, and then Beef, spilling onto TV. Lucy Liu wasn't part of any of those. So you almost like, you don't forget about her, but you maybe didn't remember.
Because she's also a foundational part of that process.
Well, that's what I'm saying. She paved the path.
She paved
and in fact, very deliberately wouldn't necessarily choose roles that were in like all Asian castings because she didn't want to play a stereotype, right? So
Which is actually what makes Rosemead really, really interesting is that it's a complete departure from what she's done, and especially because she was a producer on this too.
EP.
She EP'd it. Okay,
Yep.
yeah, and she has an accent. I think this is, other than her probably up and coming roles of playing an immigrant role. She probably has only played an immigrant role maybe like twice. If you want, I guess I just saw her in Kill Bill, the whole damn movie thing. I mean, technically, she's kind of a reverse immigrant in that context. she's like a Chinese Japanese American who infiltrates the Yakuza world. So I guess that's kind of reverse immigration. But
to your point, she's most known for roles like Charlie's Angels, for Ally McBeal, for Kill Bill, like not characters where she's not using an accent, where she's not just playing like an immigrant, right? She hasn't played the immigrant really that much.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I do remember her in this tiny role on an X-Files episode where she's like the sick daughter and she peeks around the corner. Like, that's it. You hardly see her. But that's like the only time.
The up and coming days.
Yeah, long time ago. But that's like the only time I actually remember seeing her speak with an accent before this. So, and I think it's meaningful.
Yeah, and it took me, it does personally, especially, I'm in my mid 40s. So, and she's not that much older than me. So hardcore, I'm the generation, and probably you too, that grew up at her height on TV and film. And so it does take about 10 minutes for all of us as audience members to rewrite that and really accept her. So for me personally, because of what her body of work so far, it did take me 10 minutes until I clicked in. When I really felt, I was like, oh, like Lucy's like portraying, she's pulling from her mom.
Right.
And that's when I really accepted her fully. So if y'all are like sitting in theater and being like, it's Lucy, just give it a time. Just give it like the first 15, 20 minutes of time.
Well, and I think what you're saying is that, she's been in a lot of like sex symbol type of roles, right? She's gorgeous. And actually, Celia, your friend Celia, when we had dinner in New York, we had this funny conversation. She was saying like, some Asians, they look even better when they age, and she specifically said like Lucy Liu. So let's be clear, Lucy Liu still is gorgeous. She's not just now choosing roles because she's aged and can no longer play that. She could still be the bombshell, but
and Michelle Yeoh as well. Just gotta sprinkle that in.
But I think because she's taken on this type of role beyond getting attention from the Asian American community and kind of thanking her for this role, which is kind of what I was getting at with some of these Lifetime Achievement tributes, she's, I think, probably getting more attention for being a really good actress, too. Right? Like, that she's taken on this type of role in an independent film.
And I'll be honest, I think, granted, for example, I wasn't involved in the Asian American scene, at the height of, her Ally McBeal days and stuff like that. But honestly, like, she generally has been quiet as far as like being Asian American. I think she's shown it through what she chooses in her work. I feel like she's never maybe done a lot of interviews about it, but instead she kind of shows, she shows it by the work she chooses. And I actually haven't seen her visual work as an artist either. And I don't know if there's any like influences from her heritage. But I'm gonna with her, like, I have friends around me who are like, who will criticize, like, well, she didn't speak up in back in the day. But I think she spoke up in different ways, though. And there's different ways to show up.
That's kind of what I was getting at, is when we had this renaissance happening and you had all these other Asian actors, the Michelle Yeohs and whatnot, and she kind of got forgotten. And in some ways you reflect on that and it's like, did she get forgotten, or was she just not a part of it, right? Was she actively not trying to be a part of it? But then I think hear some of the stories, and I heard a story about her taking the role for Charlie's Angels, and to her, she was still on Ally McBeal at the time.
Right.
And she went to David Kelly and said, I've got to leave the show because I've got an opportunity to be a Charlie's Angel.
Right.
And she had to explain to him, because, I'm
that's
sure
right.
at
Marilyn
that time,
told us. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Marilyn told us the story.
Yes.
Yeah. You're making, $100,000 probably an episode. So she's making tons of money doing Ally McBeal, but it meant so much to her.
Mm-hmm.
Now I feel kind of silly telling the story that Marilyn just told us, but it meant so much to her to be an Asian in that role, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not because it was a role that required an Asian American, but just that she could be this symbol to other Asians that, hey, this is America. So
yeah.
I think she has done it in like trying probably to avoid controversy, etc. Like sometimes Simu gets himself into, like, hasn't been vocal as much as you've observed. I think that's probably true. But
and like Constance too. Constance moved back in the day. She got herself
exactly.
a bit of,
So you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? But I
don't think Lucy, like, at this point, like, I know you use the word forgotten. I don't think Lucy's someone who's, like, forgotten. She will choose to, like, not do that.
No, you're missing the point of what I'm saying, though. I'm saying, like, when people would list off, like, who are the Asian actors that are making this big transition in Hollywood toward more, she wasn't really a symbol of that, right? But you have to kind of go back and reflect and say, well, actually, she is a big reason why this is still happening, right?
Yeah, I think she was. I personally, if I was in Lucy's shoes, I'd been like, like everything all at once is going on and stuff like that, and been like, I already. Because Ellie, she was working like crazy for what, 8-9 years?
Yeah.
She didn't have a life for 8-9 years. Let's say 10. She didn't have a life for 10 years.
Don't forget, it's not just that show. She was also on a show called Sherlock, right, where she played Watson.
And Elementary.
Which also ran, or Elementary.
Elementary,
that's Sherlock. Yeah.
That's right.
I just
she had a little bit of a break.
Yeah. So she's always been working. That's not the thing at all.
Yeah.
But I also, there's probably some other elements, like she doesn't have to be number 3 on a call sheet for a movie like Crazy Rich Asians, right? She's too big of a star for that.
She's really has control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, again, kind of this moment in time, what I'm reflecting on is because when I went to this Critics' Choice luncheon, she had the table right in front of the stage. And so everyone who came up and gave their speech was looking right at her. And whether it was Chloe Zhao or one of the younger actresses like Chase Wonders or Elion, they all couldn't help themselves but say, I can't believe I'm looking at Lucy Liu, right?
Yeah.
And I think in my mind, I had forgotten that she is truly a symbol of Asian American representation. And it's not because she did Asian roles, it's because she did roles that could have been for anybody and was able to be the Asian person representing us,
one
right?
of the first.
One of the first, and has been doing it for a long time. And in an amazing way. So, you could tell I was very excited to talk to her.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and then just to make sure we give a nod to Eric, who's also on our podcast.
Sorry, Eric, we're trying to talk about Lucy. But I'm sure you're like, that's why I'm the director.
No, but he directed a beautiful film. Like, as we learned also from Maryland, there's not that much source material, right? There's there's a LA Times article and some research notes. There aren't that many people in the community or the family of Irene and Joe that they could talk to. Even one of the friends was getting a lot of hard time from the community for talking to them a bunch. So they had to create something, right, that felt empathetic, non-judgmental. Both Lucy's character and Joe's character and the other characters in it, the friends and of both the boy and the mom, they all do a really beautiful job, and they do a really nice job of pictorializing something that's not. So if you overdo it too much, then it's hard to not become judgmental, right? Yep. Like if he had been a violent, schizophrenic, like over the top
Right.
episodes,
Yeah.
then you would have expected maybe a certain reaction
Yeah,
from
and when it's
Lucy,
when it's
right?
pushed too far like that, it gets end up being two dimensional.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah,
Or how they address gun violence and mass shootings, right?
yeah,
Like you could have made the whole movie about that, but
yeah.
they're
But like,
careful not
really,
to do it.
shout out to Eric though, and Lawrence. I was checking on his IMDb really quick, but this is his first feature.
Yeah, Lawrence's first feature. So that's
Yeah,
the other piece,
and
right?
before Rosemead was a short film. So
Yes.
like, props
Yeah.
to Lawrence, and and probably props to Eric.
And Eric
Who
gave props to Lucy on this one too, because Lucy, in some ways, was like a motherly figure to
has to
him
be, yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
in the making of the film. And I'm sure even now, like having to go through the press tours,
Oh gosh,
I'm
ooh.
sure he's still leaning heavily on Lucy and the
Yeah.
others
We're like, what the hell's going
for how
on?
to navigate this world.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why do people keep
Yeah.
asking me the same three questions over and over again for 5 hours a day? What is
Yes.
this? What did I sign up for? Let's get back on
Yeah.
set. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Amazing.
hope I hope he continues to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, honestly, I feel like the Netflix, like the live action Avatar Last Airbender, you have all the kids entering those shows at tween age. So it's been really kind of fun, nice of always looking at like the teenager kids right now coming up,
Sure.
because that's always really exciting.
Well, there's that one kid, Ben Wang, that's been getting tons
Yeah.
of roles, right? Like he was
Yes, Ben's been doing
Karate Kid
well, and-
Legends, and what else?
Yeah, and I'm like, my homie from Pen 15. He's playing what's his face from Fire Nation on Airbender. Sorry, dude.
I don't know. I'm not great at Airbender stuff.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, I just don't. Hold on.
Yeah.
Live action. Why can't I?
Well, I mean, maybe this is a good way to wrap up the conversation,
Yeah.
because again, it is because of people like Lucy that a lot of these young Asians became actors to begin with,
Oh,
right?
sorry, Dallas Liu. Sorry. Just
Oh, yeah,
little
Dallas.
shout out. Yeah, little shout out to
Ah.
Dallas, because they're all that. I think Lawrence may be a little bit younger, but they're in that. I don't know. It makes me feel like such a happy auntie, seeing all these
Right.
like.
Hey, you
tweens
too,
and
Junko.
teens,
You
yeah.
you are also in the category of people that are trying to make it easier for these up and coming actors to get roles. So it's great to see
Yeah.
them getting roles. Dallas actually was in a short film called Shutterbird with a director called Ray. His full name's Justin Ray Ching, and he's an up and coming director.
Yeah,
but that
yeah,
was
yeah.
a good little film that maybe at some point we'll feature on the podcast.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. I'm gonna
without
have him
further
on.
ado,
Yes.
I'm excited to play the interview so we'll play Lucy's first and then Eric's second.
Yeah.
But please listen to Eric's interview too, because he's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you're going to want to know what his favorite food is too. So Juka, we'll see you again soon.
Yep.
And thanks everybody for listening. We've been united by rice. I'd love to start really from the beginning, and you've chosen so many different types of roles, and maybe we'll get into that over your career. But what drew you to this project, to the point of not only wanting to star in it, but also really help play a huge role in getting it to the screens?
Well, I think for me, this movie was vital because we don't have anything like this. We don't have anything talking about an immigrant family and their struggle. And the struggle could be anything, but in this particular case, it has to do with the struggle of grief and loss, as well as mental health. And it's definitely something that we don't talk about in our community, but it is also something that every family can relate to in terms of whether they've gone through it themselves or they know friends that have gone through it themselves or their families. There's always a connection, and I think it's
Sure.
not talked about and it's not brought up. And it's also why the story is so tragic.
hmm and in our history of seeing how Asian moms are depicted on film, oftentimes we see the tiger mom, or we see somewhat extreme examples. I know there's not a whole lot of source material on Irene. So how did you go about shaping her character. You know, she's always restrained. She doesn't react too quickly to Joe's actions, for instance, and it's a very wonderful portrayal of empathy. And I just love to hear how you put that together.
For me, I really think culturally that's the environment that I grew up in. And I think that there was a lot of language within the silence. And
Hmm.
for the actual dialogue and the dialect of Mandarin Chinese, there's also a softness and a poetry
Hmm.
there that I think is beautiful and brings a lot of love to how people communicate within families. And that was a very important part of, preparing for this role and to bring the nuance of her love for her son and her nurturing, and at the same time her sense of humor and her, the complexity of where she was in her life at that time.
Hmm. You know, the reaction that you've gotten from this film, it's almost like there's a lifetime achievement moment happening for you. Is it surprising that this film, of all the roles that you've had over the years, has been the one to really kind of, I think, bring you to the spotlight more than ever?
I mean, I think that people were expecting, that my career trajectory would be more oriented towards, I guess, more commercial action films. And so maybe this movie is different in that regard because it's a vehicle to really show that it was not my intention to
Hmm.
just do action and that
Hmm.
there's a lot of levels of opportunity in this movie to show, the potential of what anyone can do, honestly. And for me, it's not so much an opportunity. It's really, it's not a showcase. It's more that I really think the story is important, and I wanted to bring a deep authenticity to it in order to have it be impactful. And it's it's a legacy movie, and I don't mean my legacy. I just mean this movie is something not just for our community, but for other families that feel isolated and judged and alone. And I
Hmm.
don't think that this is an incident that is was only allocated to 2015 in Rosemead. I think it's something that happens even today and in big cities or in more, you know, smaller villages and towns. And I really, I don't want more heartbreak when
Hmm.
there could be more communication and more education and more outreach.
Hmm. In terms of going back to the film and the research that you did do, have you in your own personal life had experiences with family members or friends with schizophrenia or serious mental health diseases like that? Because how you portray that is also very important outside of the Asian American community, just to the mental health community and the medical community.
I know friends who have lost their family members.
Mm,
They were diagnosed with, various different mental health diagnoses and have been homeless. They were homeless and then ended up obviously on the streets, but also are no longer with us. And these
mhm,
are not necessarily people that were old.
mhm,
They were young people, and I think there was a lot of denial, from at least one party's family that there was anything wrong. It was just stress related. It was, college related. And I think the rejection of what something is does not help the diagnosis and doesn't help the person that they love so much.
Hmm.
because it leaves them with very little options. And I think that it's always heartbreaking, no matter, you know, how it goes and how people receive it.
Sure. You know, the way you've shaped your career, it's interesting. We went through this like little Asian renaissance with Crazy Rich Asians and Everything Everywhere and Shang-Chi, and Lucy Liu was not in any of those films. And it's almost as if the way you had chosen roles previously, it's like, oh, you know, Lucy is one of our great Asian American actresses, where, and yet we maybe have forgotten about her. So this, I think, brings us back 360 to putting you right in the forefront of that. And I would just love to ask you, from the time you started in this industry to now, like, have you seen a lot of change? And what work do you think we still need to do to continue to elevate and get these stories made?
I've seen some change. I think that I would love to see more. I
Mhm.
want to be, I think it's good to be greedy about that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I
I,
was shocked that this is the first time you've been number one on the call sheet, is my understanding, correct?
for a leading movie, yeah, for a leading
Yeah.
role in a movie, yes. I do feel like, I mean, I think there's opportunity for everyone. So I don't, I don't ever feel like I was lost in the shuffle. But I do think that, for me, my hope is that there are more stories, not just about mental health, but just about families. There can
Hmm.
be stories about marriage and, the complexity of life and relationships and everyday stories that we see
Hmm.
that focus also behind closed doors for us. I don't
Hmm.
think we necessarily, only have to be allotted to, playing a particular character in a particular genre. And so this is to me what, part of humanity. And that's what, my job as an artist is to represent that part of humanity. And I hope to continue to do that.
Sure. And you know, I, I don't know, I'm just guessing, but you've very deliberately, I feel like, chosen roles where you weren't put in like the stereotypical, forced to do a stereotypical role, force an accent, be the dragon lady, those type of things. And I admire you for that. Now you've got enough credibility in your career that you can make sure that you're not cast in roles like that. What advice do you have for the young Asian actors that are out there who, you know, sometimes the first offer they get is a role that feels a little bit too close to the stereotype?
Interesting. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think there are stereotypes that exist, but I think that for me, when I had played roles in the past that had an accent or involved the language of, Mandarin Chinese, those are roles I could connect to because I grew up in that environment with, my family having an accent. And
Mhm.
so, is it a stereotype or is it something that you feel is a stereotype? Because we want to make sure that everyone is represented.
Oh yeah, and I don't just mean accents, but let's say, you
Uh-huh.
know, there's a new Mortal Kombat movie coming out, so it's like here
Hmm.
you are, you're the martial arts woman, and that's all you do is you're a fighter, you don't bring anything else to the table, right? That's like your stereotypical Asian role that we've seen for
Right.
decades.
But you know what?
Yeah.
There's also the idea behind it is like, we all, I don't disagree with you at all, but I also think that there's something really beautiful about the fact that we have had over 5,000 years of history,
Sure. Sure.
and so the art of martial arts and the art of, herbal medicine and acupuncture and all those things, like we can own that, and if you're going to do it, like, revel in it and have fun. So
Yeah.
there's different ways to approach how you can be an artist and also to develop your craft and to meet people and to see things as an opportunity and not to necessarily judge them always.
Hmm.
And I think there's a way through it, and a way forward where you can also express how you can do something better or represent it more authentically. So I don't think there should be a, you know, a black and white situation. I think there's a
Hmm.
way where you have an opportunity to show something for what it is in a more authentic way that I think is can be, I guess, more giving
Sure.
than
Sure. More
judging. And I think
empowering too. Yeah.
that's how some of the work through that I've done, has been able to be elevated and
Hmm.
I don't know, to educate and be part of that.
We ask all of our guests on our podcast, United by Rice, this one last question. Um, Long shoot or you're away from home for a long time, is there a rice dish or a noodle dish that you really crave when you get back home and want something comfortable?
Um, I mean, I feel like I eat rice no matter where I go, and then I love just something simple like egg on
Yeah.
rice with seaweed.
Uh-huh.
But if I had to choose something that I would really crave, I would really like to have like a bowl of ramen,
Okay. Yeah.
because that's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
something you can necessarily pick up anywhere, and maybe you don't want to,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's like filled with MSG. But for me, I I feel like I eat rice like every single day. I'm not sure if it's a
Yeah.
good thing or not, but it's like a part of my, my normal everyday go-to.
It doesn't look like it's hurting you. And believe it or not, the bowl of rice with just an egg and then whether it's nori or something else on it is the most common answer. So you're in good
Is
company.
it? Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm glad
Yeah.
to be amongst the common number because to me, like the simplicity of it makes me so happy. And
Yeah.
then some sesame oil, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Well, hi, Eric. It's nice to see you again. It's been a pleasure seeing the ride that Rosemead has been on and getting the attention that it so much deserves. How are you surviving the award season?
It's all new to me, but I'm just excited to talk about Rosemead. I'm so glad people are interested in hearing more about it. So thanks for having me.
Sure, of course. Well, we know films like this often it's quite a journey to even get them to the screen. Can you talk about at what point you entered the project and how it all came about?
Yeah, let's see. I was sent the script by a producer, one of the producers, Minette Louie, who I've shot. I have a career as a cinematographer, and I've shot a couple features for Minette. We came up through indie film together. In fact, the first set that she ever worked on was a NYU thesis film that I was DPing, and our DP on Rosemead Lyle was actually on that same set doing sound. So
Mm.
we came back many, many years later to make Rosemead. Um, yeah, luckily Minette thought of me. Her producing partners Andrew Theo and Theo James. Oh, sorry, Andrew Corkin and Theo James had optioned the article from LA Times, the Frank Xiong's article that the
Mhm.
script is based on, and they hired Marilyn Fu to adapt it.
Mhm.
And after they had a script that they thought was in good shape, they started looking for directors, and I was one of the people. Luckily Minette thought of me. I had just been mostly shooting features and commercials and documentaries, and we had talked about working on projects together way, way back in the day. But yeah, luckily she thought of me, and I read it, and it completely broke my heart. Like I saw
Sure.
my own family within the story, and people I knew. I recognized sort of the dynamics of the Asian American family and how shame can sort of drive so much of their behavior. And so yeah, I pitched on it, and luckily, they took a leap of faith on me and let me direct.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at all the films that have kind of cracked through this year in terms of like the Asian community. You've got this film, you've got Rental Family, you've got No Other Choice to some degree. I know that's not like an Asian American film. Um, I'm sure I'm missing one or two, but they all actually are around this theme of what happens when mental health isn't addressed and talked about openly. And I'm curious, picking up this topic both from Irene's point of view, the mother's point of view, but also Joe's point of view, how exposed to that had you been previously, and then what did you need to go out and kind of study to make sure you characterized their roles in an empathetic way?
Yeah, I had friends and family close friends and family who struggle with their mental health, and I could see, and that's part of the reason I felt like I could direct this film because I felt like I could tell it truthfully and honestly, because I've seen how, especially Asian American families how, you know, mental health can sort of stretch the bounds of Asian American families and how they grapple with it and the fear of the knowledge of the illness sort of spreading around the community and how they try to keep that private, and that sort of breeds this sort of isolation that prevents them from maybe some of the help that they need, desperately need. Um, but in terms of like authentic portrayal of schizophrenia, that was like top of my mind, and so it's something me and Lawrence Chow, our actor who plays Joe, really tried to do as much homework as we could. There was a lot of memoirs which have been great, of people who live with schizophrenia and talk about their experience. But what's also been incredible is that there are people on YouTube who have schizophrenia who are filming their psychotic episodes, to sort of demystify what it is. And, they will sort of describe it as they start to feel it come on. They'll turn on a camera. They'll start to describe kind of what they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're hearing. And then, and that helped inform a lot of like, how we wanted to portray it and how, and, just raw material we could give Lawrence to work with, in terms of like how he would build that performance. And, we rehearsed a lot we rehearsed a lot of the psychotic episodes to really kind of like find what made the most sense. Like it had to be, you had to, the audience had to feel his torment and his fear and, what he was going through, but also how much of his love for his family and how much he wanted to protect them and how that was all sort of wrapped up in it. And so how to work these sort of things together while he's going through a psychotic episodes, is very, very tricky. And that was like something we worked on a lot in our rehearsals. But yeah, we did as much. We talked to psychotherapists, we talked to as many people as we could to really understand like what the experience is like and how to, let audiences access it.
Sure, and of course this is based off of a true story. But the article that I've read from the LA Times is pretty short. I'm sure you got access to more research and whatnot, but when it came to the actual relationship that Joe had with his mother, as well as his school friends, the film does a really nice job of showing these relationships, showing obviously the highs and lows of those relationships, but at the end of the day really showing that there was a group of people that really cared for him, protected for him. How much of that was kind of created for the film versus did you get access, did you talk to any of his friends from high school, things like that, to get some of those insights as well?
Yeah, the article is sort of from the perspective of Ping, the best friend of the mother, who in our film is essentially Kylie. And so it was always sort of an outsider's perspective looking in, right? She gave more context to kind of the story, sort of the headline that everybody read, but she really provided sort of that backstory. And so, yeah, Frank gave us some of his research notes, and I talked to Frank a lot about some things that didn't make it into the article that gave us further insight into kind of the behaviors at home. But again, it was all through secondhand reporting, either talking to detectives or talking to school or people who were around Joe but never directly in the home. So it took a lot of emotional sort of detective work, to figure out, first of all, what even like their trajectory was, what Irene's trajectory was to end up where she was. We had, obviously certain facts and certain goalposts that, guided us. But to actually understand what it took, emotionally for a mother to do what she did, was something that we had to really piece together and, how to balance that with Joe's story as well. But what was interesting to us is we had written the character of Jeannie as it is in the script. We met Ping's son did go to school and grow up with George, the boy in the article, in the true story. And so that sort of relationship is true, that there was a best friend and then there was, a son. They weren't like close friends, but they did go to school together. But what was interesting is at the time that Frank did his reporting, all the kids that knew George were underage, so they were all minors, so he couldn't speak to any of them. But actually, after our announcement of that Lucy was attached and they were making a film, I think it was almost like 4 or 5 years ago. A lot of them were older now, and they actually came forward, and wanted to talk about, they were in classes with George, the boy, and one woman, her experience with George is actually very similar to Jeannie in our film, which was totally sort of by creative happenstance that this woman, I think her relative, or it might have been her brother, had autism, so she went to camps and she sort of could spot people who needed more help or needed more reach in terms to of like accessing them socially. And so she was someone who tried to be friendly to George, and she said it took like months for him to actually finally say hi to her. And so similarly, Jeannie has that same sort of motivation to she sees him in distress and she wants to reach out and she's trying to help but doesn't know how. So it was reassuring to find that there were people like that around George, the actual boy.
I maybe without giving away the ending, although I'm sure a lot of people go into this film already knowing it. The motivations for Irene, the ending is surprising, regardless of whether you know the story or not. But I feel like one of the motivations that you don't try to imply is fear of her own safety. In other words, Joe, despite the fact that he has these episodes, never is violent toward his mother or his friends. Is that something that you kind of verified through all the conversations you had and interviews that you had with his family circle and friend circle?
Yeah, there was never any indication that there was violence against people. There was, like in the article, they sort of mentioned, there is sort of evidence of like the broken iPad, or, things were broken in the house, picture frames, or these things where, there was evidence of something happening in the house, but nothing that ever suggested that he actually was violent towards people, and that's something that the film is sort of like walks that line, because we have to create this fear within Irene that, I think it's many different factors that, she fears that he might be violent, and if he does hurt someone, what will happen to him if she's gone. But at the same time, never to actually indicate that he actually was violent, because he wasn't. He had episodes, and clearly he had, he had erratic behavior, but there was never a point where he ever attacked somebody or actually acted in a way that suggested that he would be violent towards anybody.
Yeah. Well, and if you watched the television show The Pit, there's a very similar theme of, there's a kid who, has done some research on mass shootings, and does that then make that person someone that should be watched closely, and things like that. It's a whole nother element to this film. How did you find the balance of, in today's day and age, it would have been really easy to then politicize the movie and have a whole theme around gun violence and our love of guns in America, but you stay away from that, I think, in a nice way. Was that a deliberate effort, and was that difficult to do when you still need to make it feel seen that there is still some threat?
Yeah, it was something we contended with in the writing and even in the shooting, and especially the editing. It's like how much to make this danger present, because like I have a very sympathetic view of Joe. Obviously, I'm very compassionate towards him and his story and his character, and but we needed to still make it believable that Irene would arrive at the decision she did, and there was those facts in the article that he was obsessed with like Dylan Roof and mass shooters, and we could not deny that, and that is what in fact sparked a lot of her fear, but so much of that fear is misguided, right? Because she tied mental illness with this, and arrived at an equation that unfortunately led her to do what she did. And even though the therapist says that most people with schizophrenia are not violent,
Right.
and this is something that was in the news at the time, and it is a fear. 2015 was sort of like the beginning of the mass shooting epidemic, especially at schools in America. I think there was like over 400 shootings that year, not just at schools but mass shootings, and it was something that was in the world, and I think like her fears of what of him and his future and what he might become was a lot of conflation of that, and but we wanted to be careful. I mean, we wanted to be very sure that Dr. Shu says that line about how most people with schizophrenia do not become violent, and I think it's but it is also like she made that causal link, and
Sure.
we had to honor that. We could not like shy away from that because that's something that a lot of people think.
Sure.
But hopefully with enough showing Joe's side with enough compassion, we could combat that and show how he was tormented and lived with a lot of fear, and that we had a lot of sympathy for what he went through, but
Yeah.
again trying to be clear that there was no indication that he was actually violent towards people.
Yeah, and I was never aware of the article or this story before Rosemead. So I don't know what the public reaction was when the article originally came out. Was Irene at that time publicly seen as a sympathetic figure, or because and I guess where I'm going is in the film, I feel like another thing you do really well is you're not passing judgment, right? You're letting the audience decide for themselves what you think of her actions or not. But I'm curious from reading the article what the public's reaction was at the time.
Well, what's interesting is when the actual event was covered, like the shooting, hopefully I can say that. A lot of the coverage of it is that headline: "Mother kills son." I don't know if I'm like spoiling everything for all your listeners, but hopefully they know about the film, or have watched it before this. But so there was a lot of coverage of the actual act, but it was very perfunctory, right? Like sort of that sensational headline, like it's crazy. This mother took him to a motel and shot him in the middle of the night, and then he's dead. And so that was one of the reasons Ping actually gave the article, and why Frank really wanted to dive deeper. Is like Ping in the article says that she didn't want her friend to be remembered as a monster, and so she wanted to give that context of what arrived at this point, and so I think initially people had just written off that article as something, or that event as something like very sensational and very like, baffling, I'm sure, for a lot of people. But I don't think there was a lot of sympathy for her. And it wasn't until sort of Ping gave that color, I think, that people started to understand like the tragedy, that, confluence of tragedies that, drove them to that point. If you get a chance, you should talk to Frank too, because the reporting of the article is fascinating too. Because Ping herself got a lot of blowback for giving the interview.
From the community.
Yeah,
I had heard that
Eric,
from
yeah.
Marilyn had mentioned that as well.
Yeah. So it's it's absolutely brave of her to do what she did.
Yeah. Well, a couple last questions.
Sure.
What was it like working with Lucy? I mean, we're all super. I feel like there's almost a lifetime achievement moment happening. It's almost like people have decided this is the role to really give her some of the recognition that she's long deserved as one of our, really champions of Asian American representation.
Yeah, I mean, she's amazing. Like when we were so thrilled when she read the script and connected with the story and what we were trying to tell, the story we're trying to tell. And I was like, so it was just awesome to find that she was completely down to earth, and like we completely bonded over our connection to the characters and our, a lot of experiences that we shared. And so I felt like she was such a great partner in telling the story, and she completely was willing to give herself completely over to the role. When we first met, I wanted to, that was the thing. I was like, we've seen this glamorous side of Lucy, and would she be willing to completely like, go away from all of that and be as authentic and raw as possible? And she wanted to dive in. Yeah, absolutely. And so that was like amazing to hear from the get-go. yeah, so I can't say enough good things. I mean, she was such an amazing partner to especially Lawrence. You know, this is his first feature.
Mm-hmm.
And so she really, I think that helped their sort of mother-son dynamic. You know, she sort of took care of him on set, had to explain marks and camera angles and coverage when I wasn't around, to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that he understood the process. And she really took care of him off camera and on camera. So, and I think that comes through in their dynamic on screen too.
Sure, sure. Well, it's been great talking to you. You may remember my last question for you, which is, you know, because we're united by rice, if you are craving something that feels like home, some type of rice or noodle dish, what does that usually look like?
Oh, it will always be fried rice. Like I can't.
Ah.
If I see it on a menu, I have to order it. Yeah.
Is there a particular protein? Is it the chicken, the shrimp fried, pork fried
The
rice?
pork. Yeah, pork fried
Okay.
rice. That's the one for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, that's the one we ordered too as a family. So, congratulations again. I'm so happy that this film's getting the attention it does. As you stated earlier, the second I start watching it, it just feels like I know this people. I know these people. I know these stories. It just feels so close to home, and it's important that you've done what you've done here to tell us a great story here. So, thank
Oh,
you so much.
thank you so much for speaking with me about it. I really appreciate it.
Of course.